The abyss in the tile. The story didn't begin with the purchase of the house. It began with a quiet, almost childlike hope for a new life. Mark and I were so young, so full of faith that love and perseverance could overcome any obstacle. The old, Victorian mansion on the outskirts of town, more like a grim, sleeping giant, became the symbol of our fresh start. It was dirt cheap, and that price, which we then considered our incredible luck, was actually the first thread leading into a web. The real estate agent, Mr. Ambrose, was a man with eyes like a belated night bird, too shiny and expressionless. He led us through the rooms, his polished shoes squeaking on the dusty parquet, his voice velvety and soothing. To questions about the previous owners, he would joke, "Oh, the McLinders? They left. In a hurry. For warmer climates, I think. Left almost all their belongings." He said warmer climates with such light irony that a chill ran down my spine. Now I understand. He knew. He was selling us to the house. Or the house to us. Mark, my practical, wonderful Mark, with his confidence that the world could be fixed, with a wrench and logic, saw only potential. "Imagine, Sarah," he said, hugging me on the doorstep. "This will be our nest, the kids' rooms upstairs, and here we'll make you a study." His dreams were so sunny, so loud, that they drowned out the house's quiet whisper. That very whisper I heard on the very first night, not as a sound but as a sensation that the walls weren't just holding coolness but had absorbed and accumulated centuries of silence. And now this silence was heavy, thick, like syrup. But my greatest love became the bathroom, the irony of fate. It was huge, with a high ceiling decorated with stucco in the form of grapevines. Now they seemed to me like petrified tentacles. The walls were lined with large tiles the color of rotting tooth marble, yellowish white, with streaks of dirty gray and rusty smudges. Near the floor, as if the walls were slowly bleeding, in the center, like a pagan altar, stood a massive cast-iron bathtub on lion's paws. Its depth was frightening and alluring at the same time. It seemed that if you submerged yourself in it head first, you could reach the bottom not of this tub, but of something much more ancient. Above the sink hung a mirror in a heavy, time and moisture-blackened wooden frame. It never reflected the world clearly, only distorting it, making faces greenish and sickly, and movements smooth, like those of drowning people. The only window under the ceiling was painted over with dark paint, as if the house did not want to let out what was inside. The air was always stale, thick with a persistent, clinging smell of old water, damp plaster, and something else. Sweetish, metallic, like the smell of coins on the tongue or blood from a nose. The first oddity was so minor that I almost convinced myself it hadn't happened. On the third day taking a shower, I heard through the noise of the water a quiet, rhythmic scraping, as if someone with dull mechanical stubbornness was dragging a fingernail across the smooth surface of the tile, trying to scratch the gloss. I turned off the water. In the ensuing silence, the sound became clearer. It was coming from under the tub. My heart began to pound with an irrational animal force. Wrapped in a towel, I tiptoed to the monstrous tub and, holding my breath, peered into the darkness between its lion's paws. Nothing, only clumps of dust like tufts of wool and impenetrable darkness. The sound stopped. "The pipes," I whispered to myself, "or mice." But the sound was too conscious, too intentional. That same night, I woke up thirsty. The bedroom was plunged into darkness. Mark was sleeping the deep, serene sleep of a man with a clear conscience. I went downstairs, poured a glass of water, and froze at the foot of the stairs. From under the bathroom door, a weak, flickering light was seeping. Not electric, but yellowish, uneven, like the flame of a candle or a kerosene lamp. "Mark?" I called quietly. No answer. My heart began to beat an alarming drum again. I pushed the door. The modern LED lamp that Mark had screwed in the day before was on. Its cold, soulless light flooded the room, but in the air hung a faint yet distinct smell of smoke and melted wax. I took a deep breath, about to leave, and then my gaze fell on the mirror. Its surface was covered with a light haze. Strange, since I had taken a shower in the evening. And on this fogged surface someone had written a word. Not written, but scratched with a thin, trembling line, as if by the very nail that had been scraping under the tub. Here. The letters were crooked, angular, filled with some mute agony. I recoiled in horror, elbowed a glass, and it shattered against the tile with a piercing ring. A moment later, a frightened Mark ran into the room. "Sarah, what happened? Are you okay?" I, shaking like an aspen leaf, pointed a finger at the mirror. But there was nothing there anymore, only a clean, slightly fogged surface reflecting our pale, fear-distorted faces. "Steam," Mark concluded confidently, hugging me. His hands were firm and warm, and so was his voice. "Just steam, a trick of the light. You're just tired, honey. New house, renovation, nerves. Let's go to bed." He was so logical, so rational. His confidence was a stone wall behind which one could hide from one's own crazy thoughts. I almost believed it. Almost. Mark plunged headlong into the renovation, seeing it as a cure for my nerves. He noisily tore up the floors. His sweater was always dusty, and his eyes burned with the excitement of a treasure hunter. Only the treasure was working pipes and even walls. I tried to avoid the bathroom. My once beloved place had become a source of quiet, constant fear. I would dash in for seconds, try not to look in the mirror, turn on the water at full power to drown out any other sounds. But the house wouldn't let go. The feeling of being watched became my constant companion. It wasn't just a feeling. It was a physical pressure on the back of my head, a chill between the shoulder blades when I turned my back to an empty room. I caught myself listening, in the silence. To what? To the house, to its creaks, to the hum in the pipes, looking for patterns, rhythm, meaning in them. I started waking up at night from the sensation of goosebumps crawling on me, even though my skin was dry and cold. One evening, when Mark was late from work, I had to go into the bathroom to wash my watercolor brushes. I stood, staring into the stream of water, trying to concentrate on its monotonous sound, and suddenly I felt it. A light, barely perceptible touch on the back of my head. Not a breeze, not a draft, but a touch. Thin, bony, freezing cold, like the tip of a finger frozen to the very marrow. I screamed and rushed to the door, but it slammed shut by itself with a deafening crash. I grabbed the handle. It wouldn't budge, as if a huge man was holding it. From the other side, panic, sharp, blind animal squeezed my throat. I began to pound on the door with my fists, scream Mark's name, but my voice was swallowed by the thick, oppressive silence of the room, which seemed to absorb sound like a blotter. And then I heard it. A whisper. It came not from one corner, but from everywhere at once, from the cracks in the floor, from the sink drain, from the darkness under the tub, even from the water itself flowing from the tap. It wasn't one voice, but many. A child's babble, an old toothless wheeze, a woman's moan full of unbearable anguish, all woven into one dreadful, indistinct chorus, full of such despair and hopelessness that the blood literally froze in my veins. Slowly, with difficulty turning my numb neck, I turned around, pressing my back against the door. The mirror was clean, but the reflection in it was not mine. In the murky depth of the glass, as if behind a thick layer of ice, stood a thin, tall figure in a soaked, dark, shapeless dress. Hair, black as pitch, matted like seaweed, completely hid her face. Water dripped from them onto the floor in the reflection, forming dark puddles, but in reality the tile remained dry and clean. She didn't move, just stood there, lifelessly dangling long, pale arms with two large, curved, almost claw-like nails. And the whisper grew louder, more persistent, And now, in this soul-chilling polyphony, words could be distinguished. The same, words in different tones. See us, help, let us out, stay, with us. I squeezed my eyes shut, buried my face in the cold wooden door, sobbing and begging for mercy, for it to be a nightmare. Suddenly, the door opened with a quiet click, and I collapsed right into the arms of Mark, who had just returned home. Good Lord, Sarah, what's wrong with you? I called. I phoned, you didn't answer. He was more frightened than ever before. His confidence had cracked. I, choking on tears and words, blurted it all out. About the whisper, about the figure in the mirror, about the locked door. This time he didn't write it off as my imagination. His face became serious, almost stern. He went into the bathroom, examined the door. No locks, just a simple latch that physically couldn't lock from the outside. He tapped on the walls, checked. The floor under the tub. All right, he sighed heavily. I've had enough. I found something when I opened up the floor last week, and then I dug around in the city archives. He led me to the living room, sat me on the sofa, poured me some cognac. His own hands were slightly trembling. This house, Sarah, it's built on the site of an old well, a very deep one, from the Victorian era. It wasn't filled in properly according to the rules. They just concreted it over from the top and built the foundation right on it. His words made me physically cold. I imagined that black bottomless hole right under our house, under our bed, under that very tub. And also, he hesitated, looking somewhere past me. The previous owners, those very McClinders, they didn't just leave for warmer climates. Their eldest daughter, Emily, she drowned in that tub. She was 7 years old. The official version, an accident. The girl slipped, hit her head. But there were rumors that she kept telling her parents that a wet lady talked to her in the bathroom, that the wet lady called her to come play. Now we were both afraid. His rational world had cracked, and the same chilling horror that had been poisoning me all this time poured in. We started sleeping with a nightlight on, going to the bathroom, only together, like two frightened children. Mark even bought a portable radio to turn it on at full volume, drowning out any possible sounds. But the feeling of presence only grew, becoming almost tangible. The air in the bathroom was always a few degrees colder, thick and damp like in a crypt, despite the steam heating. At night, from behind the door, came an insistent, nasty gurgling, as if someone was slowly, with pleasure, filling the tub, even though we had turned off all the taps at the meter. And one morning we found on the floor, on the pristine tile that I had so carefully washed, several puddles of stagnant, murky water, stretching from the bathroom through the hallway right to our bedroom door. They were cold and smelled of pond, scum. I began to change. Fear became my second skin, my constant state. I caught myself staring at the surface of water in a cup for hours, expecting it to stir. I flinched at any sound of dripping. I covered the mirrors in the house with old sheets. I couldn't bear the thought that something other than me might be reflected in them. My dreams became full of water. I was drowning in black, bottomless depths, and from the bottom, pale, bloated, faces with empty eye sockets looked at me. Mark saw my torment, and his fear gradually gave way to desperate, almost fierce determination. He decided to fight, not with the ghosts, but with their source. He declared that he would get to that very well, break open the concrete, and I don't know what he planned. Fill it in? Consecrate it? His idea seemed insane to me, but there was a fire in his eyes, and that was better than paralyzing horror. The climax came on Saturday. Mark drove to the hardware hypermarket for a jackhammer and extra flashlights. I was left alone. The silence in the house was ringing, taut like a string. I tried to read, but the letters blurred before my eyes. I turned on the radio in every room, but it seemed to me that I could still hear that whisper through the music. And then I heard it. Not a gurgle, not a scrape. A quiet, plaintive, heartbroken crying. A child's crying. It was coming from behind the bathroom door. My mind, exhausted by weeks of fear, screamed at me that it was a trap, that I must not go. But in that cry was such sincere, such bottomless longing that it broke through all my barriers. It was the cry of a lost, frightened child. Emily, that very girl? Pity and desperate, irrational hope overcame fear. Maybe she needed help? Maybe she wanted to warn me? I took Mark's heavy metal flashlight, not for protection, but as a symbol of his strength and resolve, which I so lacked, and entered. The room was empty. The crying stopped as suddenly as it had begun. A dusty sunbeam breaking through the painted-over window hung motionless in the air like a golden pillar. And then I saw her, not in the mirror, in reality. She was sitting on the edge of the tub, dangling her pale, thin legs in striped knee socks. She wore a clean, light dress, but it was soaked through, as were her light brown hair. Water dripped from her strands onto the tile, forming dark, perfectly round spots. She wasn't looking at me, staring at the floor, and her thin shoulders shook with soundless sobs. "Little girl," I called quietly, almost soundlessly, clutching the cold flashlight in my sweaty hand. "Emily?" She slowly raised her head. Her face was not evil, but infinitely sad, frightened, and lonely. She was translucent. I could see the pattern of the tile and the shadow from the sink through her. Her eyes were huge and full of tears that rolled down her cheeks and disappeared before reaching her chin. "I can't leave." Her little voice was like the sound of bursting bubbles, like the whisper of wind in the reeds. "She won't let me. She won't let anyone go." "Who?" I whispered, feeling my soul freeze and my heart stop in my chest. In response, she just raised her thin, almost weightless little hand and with a trembling finger pointed towards the sink, or rather, under it, to where the drain was in the wall, and then the shadows in the room thickened, crawling from the corners like black liquid tar. The light bulb above the mirror flickered once, twice, and went out with a quiet hiss, plunging everything into semi-darkness. The sunbeam dimmed, as if someone had blown it out. The air became heavy, thick, hard to breathe. From the sink's drain, whole with a nasty, wet, squelching sound, something began to appear, something black, greasy, shapeless, made of tangled seaweed, silt, rotting hair, bone fragments, and something else I couldn't and didn't want to distinguish. It crawled out slowly and inexorably, filling the space under the sink, spreading across the wall, and from it came that same sweetish, putrid smell of old water, silt, and death, the smell of the depths, the smell of a grave that was never found. The crying ghost girl simply vanished, dissolved into the thickening gloom as if she had never been. The mass stirred, swayed, and from its center, slowly, as if from thick oil, that same figure rose, tall, thin to the point of skeletal, in a dress caked with silt and slime that might once have been white. Her face was hidden by wet strands of hair, but on an instinctual level, I felt her gaze upon me. A gaze full of ancient, insatiable, absolute malice. The whisper returned, but now it was not plaintive, but full of hatred, hunger, and triumph. It sounded not in my ears, but right in my head, scraping at my brain, creeping into the most hidden corners of my consciousness. Many of us were here, in the well, cold, dark, so dark, eternal night. Everyone wanted to get out, screamed, called, but the well was closed, walled us up here, forever. But we found a way, always through water. Any water remembers. Any water leads to us. It will bring new ones and new ones to replace us so that we can finally leave. The entity moved towards me. Its movement was unnatural, gliding, as if it was swimming through the air. Long, bony fingers with broken, blackened, curved nails reached for my throat. From under the strands of hair I caught a glimpse. Pale, bloated skin, a black slit of a mouth. I screamed, but the sound stuck in my throat. I recoiled, tripped over the lion's paw of the tub, and hit the back of my head, on the sharp edge of the tile border. A fireworks of pain and darkness exploded in my eyes. I came to with Mark shaking me by the shoulders. His face was distorted with horror, so real and raw that it became doubly frightening. "Sarah! Sarah! My God, what happened to you? Who did this? What is this?" he shouted, his voice breaking into a screech. I focused my gaze with difficulty. The walls from floor to ceiling were covered with the same angular, frantic inscriptions as the first time. "Let out. Here. Cold. Help. Don't go." They covered every surface, even the ceiling, even the bottom of the tub itself, as if drawn by an inhuman force that knew no bounds of gravity. And on the mirror, at its very top, in giant sweeping letters as if written with a bloodied finger, was scrawled, "She is ours now." That same evening, we packed our things and left for a motel. We never returned. The house was sold for a pittance to the next naive dreamers who, like us, believed in a cheap fairy tale. Mr. Ambrose was again leading someone with shining eyes through the rooms. But that is not the end. It was only the beginning of my real, deep existential nightmare. Now I am afraid of water, not just wary. I experience a panic, physiological horror of it. I take showers for 10 seconds, with the door wide open, not closing my eyes, and it seems to me that the jets are thousands of cold, tenacious fingers. I don't look in mirrors. I've covered them with cloth, but sometimes passing by I notice that the fabric is slightly damp to the touch. I only drink carbonated water from small glass bottles. Clear water from the tap seems murky, alive, sinister, to me. I started seeing things. Not only in my own house. In a puddle on the asphalt I sometimes see not my reflection, but a fleeting pale mask with dark hollows for eyes. In the condensation on a bus window, those same angular letters might appear for a moment here, and sometimes, in the quietest night silence breaking through the noise of the city, I hear it. A distant, barely audible, wet whisper. It has become quieter, but more persistent. It calls. It reminds me. Mark tries to support me. He takes me to doctors. They talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, prescribe pills. The pills make me lethargic, sluggish, but they do not drown out the whisper. They only muffle my own voice, leaving me alone with them. They found me. Because they were not tied to that house. They were tied to water. To all the water that had ever touched that cursed well, that had seeped through its walls, that held in its memory its freezing cold and darkness. They are the memory of water, its dark, drowned conscience. And they are hungry. They want to replace themselves with someone else, to get out, to find peace by taking mine. And I feel their patience running out. Their attention to me is becoming more and more attentive, more personal. Yesterday morning I discovered that the water in the filter pitcher had stagnated, and on its surface floated a small, twisted piece of algae, completely dry to the touch. They are already here. They are always here, waiting in every drop, in every reflection, in my own fear, which has become a door for them. And I know that the next time I turn on the tap, it might not be water that gushes out, but something else, something black, slimy, made of forgotten fears and drowned souls full of age-old bottomless hatred. And the door is already ajar.